F1 has a huge problem. Don't get me wrong, I do love the odd street circuit on the F1 calendar. And yes, I am in favour of Monaco staying on the calendar when other people think it should go. But we are starting to see way too many street circuits on the calendar for the sake of the sport's own good. And now we're seeing circuits like Spa get put on rotation, which is just wrong. So, give me your thoughts in the comments. Street circuits, do you love them? Do you hate them? And should they be replacing traditional circuits on the calendar? In recent years, we see more and more street circuits get added to the calendar, such as Jeddah and Las Vegas. Let's face it though, both tracks have provided some good races, especially Jeddah in 2021, but racing's not the problem here. For starters, Jeddah is such a controversial place to have an F1 race. In 2022, they were literally racing in the middle of a war zone during practice. Literally, there was an explosion in the background of one of the shots of FP1. And yes, the race still went ahead because F1 are all about making money. Even though the drivers were up till very late, I remember being up till about 2 in the morning, refreshing Twitter over and over again to get updates on what the drivers were up to and to see if the race was still actually going to go ahead, because I remember loads of pictures going around on Twitter of just drivers sitting in one room. Hamilton was along with Vettel, Perez, all the drivers you can think of from the 2022 season were in that room discussing whether or not the race should go ahead because F1 was racing in a war zone. Now, I don't want to sound like one of them wet wipes, but when F1 are campaigning to improve equality and diversity, is it really a good look when you're racing in Saudi Arabia when there's a war going on in the background? Especially in a country like Saudi Arabia anyway, where they don't have the best record for human rights, do they now? So there's one problem with street circuits. Some of them don't stand up to human rights. Furthermore, who remembers in 2023 when Las Vegas was being set up for the race? I do, and all I remember is loads of people complaining on TikTok and any other social media about how the track was ruining the scenic views. I remember they had to drain some of the fountains just to put grandstands in. The traffic looked like it was a nightmare. I remember watching one of Simon Wilson's videos as well. He was doing like some Monopoly video or something like that, and he got caught in Las Vegas. And he was so shocked at how bad Las Vegas looked because they had to cover up all the bridges so you couldn't see over them, because if they didn't cover them up, then people would get free tickets to the race. This was not a good look for F1, especially when they're trying to break through into the American market. And as good as it is to have a race in Las Vegas and to see F1 cars going down the Las Vegas Strip at about 200 miles an hour, there should have been a better way of doing it, because the last thing F1 wants to do is piss off Americans, which is something they definitely did in 2023. So there's the second bad thing about street circuits. They cause a lot of disruption. Street circuits also have a lack of character. Okay, apart from Monaco. Monaco's got lots of character, but Monaco's exempt from this. But at what street circuits do you see corners like a Rouge and Raidillon, or Maggots and Beckett's at Silverstone, or even Copse? You don't. Most street circuits are just full of 90-degree corners, and no F1 fan wants to see that, as it doesn't provide any excitement to the fans or challenge to the drivers. And Baku is one of them circuits. Even though Baku has probably provided some of the best racing we've seen in recent years, some parts of that circuit are so boring. The first sector, every single corner is like 90 degrees, so it's just so repetitive and there's no challenge for the drivers. And this leads me to my next point. Street circuits are so limited in design. When you're designing a street circuit, you've got to design it around the area you're putting it in. And this gives so many restrictions to the design of that circuit. You have to have slow, boring corners to slow the cars down, because no one wants to see an F1 car going through their shop window. But then if you're designing a traditional circuit, you don't have to worry about that. You can do whatever you want. You can have any kind of corner you want. Yes, there's terrain you've got to design it around, but that just makes it even better. Got Spa. Spa is so characteristic and famous because of the terrain of that circuit. Imagine if a Rouge and Raidillon was just flat. There should be no characteristic to it. It should be a boring left-right chicane. This is what F1 fans want to see. Corners that separate the best drivers from the worst drivers. Corners that actually make the drivers scared. F1 cars are not built to go through 90-degree corner all the time. They're built for going through fast, high-speed corners like Raidillon, Maggots and Beckett's, Copse, Parabolica. The list can go on. And there is nothing more satisfying than watching an F1 car go flat out through high-speed corners on a traditional circuit during qualifying. And again, Before people come at me in the comments about Monaco being one of the best qualifying sessions of the year, yes, Monaco is also very satisfying to watch an F1 car go around in Q3, and is one of the very few street circuits where it is. Street circuits also provide some of the most boring races I have ever watched. Because they're just that slow and that boring, it just separates the cars out and they can't follow each other and stay close because the circuit is just surrounded by so much dirty air. Therefore you hardly ever see an overtake at a street circuit. And yes, some normal circuits have this problem as well where cars can't follow each other and overtake. But at least at a traditional circuit there's more chance of an overtake and there's more characteristic to them circuits as well. Street circuits also have a much lower capacity. For example, look at the capacity of Monaco. Yes, now I'm coming at Monaco. Last season, the attendance at Monaco was 200,000 people across the weekend. And you may look at that and you may be like, oh, that's actually really good. Like 200,000 people. Yes, that is good. But then you look at the figures for Silverstone, the attendance was 480,000 people across the weekend. That's more than double what Monaco can handle. Almost 500,000 people at an event is crazy. Because Silverstone is able to have such a much higher capacity for Monaco, when it comes to races like Monaco where the capacity is much lower, F1 has to bump the prices up. And that makes it so difficult for the average F1 fan to be able to get to a race. And F1 knows that, so they cater more towards the rich. Most tickets towards races like Monaco are hospitality tickets. And some of the general admission views you get at Monaco are actually a joke. I remember I watched one of Alex Gillen's videos about general admission at Monaco, and his view was a view of Raskas, one of the final few corners. But he could not see anything from where he was. I think he even said he might as well just watched it on TV at home because the view he had, that was not worth the money he paid for it, which was probably quite a lot as well. Another example of this is Las Vegas. Last season, if you wanted to sit in a grandstand at Las Vegas for the whole weekend, it would have cost you $1,800, which is about £1,400. But if you want to go to Silverstone for a 3-day weekend and to sit in a grandstand, you would only have to pay as low as £400. Yes, that's still extremely expensive, but at least you won't have to sell everything you own to go to Silverstone compared to Las Vegas or Monaco. Look, I don't mind having the odd street circuit on the F1 calendar because a lot of street circuits are part of F1 history, like Monaco. I remember Adelaide, I wasn't even born. Yeah, but anyway, Adelaide, which is a really historic circuit. I've heard people say they wish they could have Adelaide back on the calendar. Also, Monaco's been on the calendar for every single season, since 1950, every single season. That is actually mental. But still, no one wants to see a calendar full of street circuits. After 2028, Spa's going to be on rotation, therefore it's only going to be once every 2 years. And what's going to come in place of that? Probably a street circuit in Chicago. Which, if that's what's going to happen, it's going to make a lot of F1 fans angry. It's actually disappointing as well to see Spa put on rotation because it's such a historic circuit in F1. The circuit where Schumacher had his first race and his first win. It's got some of the most famous corners in F1, Rouge, Raidillon, Blanchimont, Pouin. And it's one of them circuits as well that separates the best drivers from the bad drivers. And my concern is Spa's not going to be the only traditional circuit we see this with. Silverstone's not got the best track record of being able to afford F1 races. I remember in 2019 there was talk of Silverstone getting put off the F1 calendar. And with the rise of inflation, it's only going to get harder for these traditional circuits to be able to afford to host an F1 race. Yes, some people are going to raise the question, well, how come these street circuits can afford to host it? Because they're paid for by their governments. I just feel that slowly over time we're going to see more and more traditional circuits that play a massive part in F1 history just drop off the calendar. Yes, I like to see new races come into the calendar. Everyone else does as well. But if these new races are just all going to be street circuits, then no one's going to tune in and people are actually going to stop watching the sport. Because no one wants F1 to become Formula E. Which is why no one watches Formula E, because it's all street circuits, the tracks are boring, the racing's boring. Some people say it's amazing. It's not. It's terrible. And I don't want F1 to become like that. So give me your thoughts in the comments. Do you think street circuits are taking over? And what do you think about that? Some F1 teams have been in F1 that long, they've seen how good these traditional circuits are. One of these teams are Williams. And if you want to see how Williams will get on in 2025, click on this video here. Subscribe to the channel for more F1 content. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you all in the next one.